Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're journeying back in time to meet a figure so colossal, so influential, that he literally shaped the map and destiny of Europe. We're talking about Charles the Great, better known to history as Charlemagne. This wasn't just a king. He was a warrior, a reformer, a patron of the arts, and a man who dreamed of a unified Christian empire. So grab your virtual medieval passport, because we're about to explore the epic life of the father of Europe. Charlemagne was born around the year 747 into a world of turmoil. The old Roman Empire was a distant memory, and Europe was a fragmented patchwork of warring tribes and fledgling kingdoms. He was born into the Carolingian dynasty, a powerful Frankish family. His father, Pepin the Short, had done something pretty bold. He deposed the last of the old Merovingian kings and declared himself king of the Franks, with the Pope's blessing. This alliance between the Frankish crown and the papacy would become a defining feature of Charlemagne's own reign. When Pepin died in 768, the kingdom was split between his two sons, Charles our Charlemagne and his brother Carloman. Now, history is full of sibling rivalries, and this was no exception. For 3 years, a tense and uneasy peace held. But thankfully for Charlemagne, and perhaps for history, Carloman died suddenly in 771. Just like that, at the age of 24, Charlemagne became the sole ruler of the West Frankish kingdom. He was ambitious, energetic, and he had a grand vision. He wasn't content to just rule. He wanted to expand, to conquer, and to unite. And expand he did. For over 3 decades, Charlemagne was almost constantly at war. He was a brilliant military strategist and a relentless commander who often led his armies in person. His most prolonged and brutal conflict was against the Saxons, a pagan Germanic people to the northeast. This wasn't just a war for territory. It was a war for souls. For over 30 years, Charlemagne fought to subdue the Saxons and convert them to Christianity, often through incredibly harsh measures. This campaign showed the two sides of his rule, the pious Christian king and the ruthless conqueror. To the south, he answered a call for help from the Pope and marched his army into Italy, conquering the Lombard kingdom and declaring himself their king. This action solidified his role as the primary protector of the papacy. He also campaigned in the south, pushing into Muslim Spain. While he didn't conquer the entire peninsula, he did establish a buffer zone known as the Spanish March. An ambush on his rearguard during this campaign, at the Battle of Roncesvalles Pass, became the stuff of legend, immortalized in one of the most famous epic poems of the Middle Ages, the Song of Roland. Through these relentless campaigns, Charlemagne more than doubled the size of his father's kingdom, creating a massive empire that stretched from modern-day France and Germany all the way to parts of Italy, Spain, and Central Europe. But Charlemagne wasn't just a warlord. He understood that a vast empire needed more than just a strong army. It needed effective governance. His empire was just too big to be managed by one person alone. So, he developed a sophisticated system of administration. He divided his territory into hundreds of counties, each managed by a count. To keep these counts in check, he created a brilliant system using officials called missi dominici *, which means envoys of the Lord. These were pairs of inspectors, usually one secular nobleman and one clergyman, who traveled the empire. They would check on local administration, deliver the king's new laws, and ensure justice was being carried out in his name. It was a remarkable system of quality control for its time, connecting the distant corners of the empire directly back to Charlemagne's court. Now, let's talk about one of the most incredible aspects of his reign, The Carolingian Renaissance. Charlemagne himself was a man of immense curiosity, though he struggled to learn to write late in life. He loved having books read to him and understood the power of knowledge. He was dismayed by the poor state of education and literacy, even among the clergy. So, he gathered the brightest minds from all over Europe to his court at Aachen. Scholars like Alcuin of York were brought in to lead a massive educational reform. They established schools in monasteries and cathedrals across the empire, standardizing curricula and promoting the study of the classical 7 liberal arts. A huge effort was made to copy and preserve ancient text works from Rome and Greece that might otherwise have been lost forever. In fact, most of the classical Latin texts we have today exist because of the copies made by Carolingian monks. They also developed a new, clearer style of handwriting known as Carolingian minuscule. If you've ever wondered why we use lowercase letters, you can thank Charlemagne's scribes. This intellectual revival laid the groundwork for the future development of Western thought. The absolute peak of Charlemagne's career, the moment that cemented his legacy, came on Christmas Day in the year 800. Charlemagne was in Rome, attending Mass at St. Peter's Basilica. As he knelt in prayer, Pope Leo III placed a crown on his head and declared him Emperor of the Romans. This was a moment of stunning significance. For the first time in over 300 years, the West had an emperor. This coronation was both a brilliant political move and a deeply symbolic one. It formally linked the power of the Frankish king with the legacy of the old Roman Empire and the spiritual authority of the Church. It declared that Charlemagne was more than just a Germanic king. He was the successor to Augustus and Constantine, the secular leader of Christendom. This act established the concept of the Holy Roman Empire, a political entity that would, in various forms, last for another 1,000 years and profoundly shape European politics. So, what happened after he reached this incredible peak? Charlemagne spent his later years consolidating his vast empire from his magnificent capital city of Aachen. He continued his legal and religious reforms, but the era of massive expansion was largely over. He was a devoted father, but like any medieval king, the question of succession was paramount. He planned to divide his empire among his 3 legitimate sons, but once again, fate intervened. 2 of his sons died before he did, leaving only one heir, Louis the Pious. Charlemagne passed away in 814 at the age of about 67. He had ruled for 46 years and left behind an empire the likes of which hadn't been seen in centuries. Unfortunately, his unified empire didn't last long. His grandsons, after a period of civil war, divided it into 3 parts with the Treaty of Verdun in 843. These 3 kingdoms would eventually evolve into the modern nations of France and Germany, with a contested Middle Kingdom in between. So, in a very real sense, the political map of modern Western Europe begins with the breakup of Charlemagne's empire. Charlemagne's legacy is, without a doubt, immense. He created the first major empire in the West after the fall of Rome. His military conquests, his alliance with the Church, and his revival of learning and culture effectively ended the Dark Ages and set Europe on a new course. He gave Western Europe a common identity, rooted in Roman heritage and Christian faith. For centuries after his death, kings and emperors would try to live up to his example. He became a figure of legend, a model of the ideal Christian king, and a saint in some parts of the Church. He is, truly, the father of Europe. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the life of Charlemagne. It's an incredible story of power, faith, and vision. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical adventure. Let me know in the comments who you'd like to see us cover next. Until then, stay curious.